It's bartering time. I'm Anthony.
I'm Damon.
I'm David.
I'm Kirby.
I'm Dr.
I'm
Kurt's
Katie.
dad. And Katie.
And I'm Jim.
I didn't say the lineup, but this will be it. It'll be the same. Sometimes when someone else is here, it changes a little bit. So myself, Damon, David, Kirby, Kurt's dad, Katie, Jim. Okay, so we'll try that over again here. All right. It's bartering time. I'm Anthony.
I'm Damon.
I'm David.
I'm Kirby.
Dr. Kurt's dad.
I'm Katie.
And I'm Jim.
Welcome to issue number 140 of the Crimson Cowl Comic Club podcast. Each and every week we meet here to talk about comics. This week we have an action-packed show for you as we're going to have a club discussion on Spider-Ham issue number 5. Then we will do a weekly reviews, which we're going to go all around the internet, talk about the books that we've been reading, both new as well as old. And then over in the letters page, we have a question that we're all going to share answers for, which is, oh no, the house next to you is for sale. Who would you hate to have as your neighbor? And who would you love to have as your neighbor? So any pop culture related comic, TV, movie answers you have, we will answer that in the letters page.
So saying my current neighbor as a neighbor that I would hate to have would not be right because it's not a pop culture reference.
Hope they're not listening.
unless they appeared in The Walking Dead or something, you know, if they're comic related. So. Okay, so we're going to kick it off here with the final issue, long awaited, of the Peter Parker to the Spectacular Spider-Ham, issue number 5. Here is the recap. Earth 8311, native reality to the one and only Spider-Ham, has become riddled with interdimensional cracks caused by a diabolical doomsday device. After enlisting the aid of the Amazing Spider-Man, Spider-Ham chased the device's dastardly designer through the multiverse and eventually confronted him at the end of time, forcing him to reveal his true identity as Kangaroo the Conqueror, the time-traveling troublemaker from Spider-Ham's dimension. The maniacal marsupial explained that he wasn't destroying Ham's world at all, but trying to save it from his dangerous doppelganger from the Prime Universe, Kang. After hurtling themselves through the time stream to face Kang head-on, the Spiders Ham and Man were shocked and vaguely grossed out to discover that Kang wasn't Kang at all, merely a marionette made by the media mogul called Mojo. That is quite a recap, but that is 4 issues worth of Spider-Ham losing his time-traveling device and a bunch of timey-wimey stuff going on and meeting up with Prime, MJ, and Peter, and then going back to the World War II era, traveling through time, finding out Kangaroo the Conqueror, and once again, with the last issue, finding out Mojo was controlling the strings, as we see it is part of his world or his master plan to reboot this world, this universe. The overview of this issue, we see a little television show in Mojo's universe as he is portraying this, trying to find a reboot for Spider-Ham. We see him trying to basically end these universes, and Spider-Ham has to make a decision that could possibly mean the loss of all of the heroes from his universe, and that is all I'll say for now until we actually dive into the issue. So I'll kick it off here. We'll kind of go around and people can take turns talking about what they liked or disliked, or if you had any questions. I thought it was pretty entertaining right off the bat that it basically was Spider-Ham was cast into a Family Guy cartoon. I didn't know what was going on with that opening song jingle, and once it went to say hello to the Hammy guy, and it showed the house, and I looked at the animation style, and you're seeing all of the Family Guy characters recast as our animal Avengers as we see them. So I thought that was a fun little way to kind of bring that in there, introduce more puns, and once again show that Mojo is just trying to change things up and do what he can there. So I really dug that moment. Anybody else want to dive in with a moment from this issue?
Yeah, I never thought I'd open up a comic book and it would be Family Guy, but that was very strange and pretty funny. They didn't mess around. They have their version of the Joker in here too, and BoJack Horseman. So I don't know. I thought out of a very weird series, this was probably the funniest one, and yeah, they did not worry about that copyright at all. So Spidey Joker, everybody, coming soon from Marvel and DC movies.
Yeah, they had a lot of fun with that one. Anyone else?
I agree. The Family Guy intro was the best part of the book.
Although a heads up would have been nice, because then you could work the jingle out in your head, because you can see it set to music, but you didn't know what it was to until you get to the end of it.
Even the little word balloon for Captain America, when I was reading it, I just heard Stewie's voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, do tell us again. I had so much fun ignoring you the first time. Yeah, going back to that theme song, whenever I hear any songs in comics, it's, you're just making it up for the most part, and so going back to what David said there, I didn't really know what kind of tune I was going with. And then playing it back, then it's like, oh yeah, the Family Guy song. But hey, now with Disney acquiring Fox, this was probably actually maybe with the delay with the coronavirus, they had some time to be like, hey, let's now we can go ahead and introduce Family Guy jokes into our comics. So, all right, anyone else want to?
Yeah, Mojo's using Peter Porker in one of his new Mojoverse television shows, but like everything else in Spider-Ham's life, he screws that up too.
Dr. Kurt's dad?
I liked it. I was actually happy to see Kangaroo King make his way back into the Council of Kings. It was nice. There's a nice happy ending for at least one character in the story. I have to say, the one thing that was interesting about the Mojoverse thing is, at least as I remember Mojo showing up in most of the other things, the point in the Mojoverse is to come up with action-packed, moving sort of stories. And you have these kind of, they're comedic, but they're sort of mundane for what Mojo normally does. Usually there's peril and shooting and
He's running out of ideas.
Well, he's got ratings to deal with, and if you find that maybe some spoof off of Family Guy is what's selling, what people are tuning into, then I guess that's what you go for.
I guess
at this point he's got a whole universe of these anamorphic characters that he's turning into TV shows, and some of them are serious and some of them are comedies, some of them are based on other cartoons because, well, it's a cartoon type of world. He forever was after the X-Men, trying to film the X-Men and put them into this because they were like the top rated characters in his Mojo verse, network or whatever. Obviously that's not the case anymore. Now he's going after
new talent.
Yeah, I mean, and we don't really know who his audience is either. Is it strictly just people in the Mojoverse, or are there people across the entire Marvel multiverse that get to tune into these programs and check them out?
Well, actually, I think there was one X-Men comic where when Mojo took over, he was then projecting it into our world too, so he could increase his audience by increasing the space you were sending it out into. So maybe it's a whole multiversal expansion by Mojo.
Frankly, I think it's just, when it comes to Mojo and what he's doing, it's just whatever works for what they need to do for the story.
Well, it probably fits in also because, hey, when you read a superhero comic, you want to see action and stuff like that. When you read Spider-Ham, you expect comedy.
Right, so maybe the audience is us.
Yes.
Kirby, anything to add on this one at all?
This was my favorite issue of the 5, but I'm still confused about the whole Black Bolt, Black Colt. I don't understand why they're always afraid to open their mouth and someone else has to tell them to do it. You're sitting around a bunch of glass containers with all your friends trapped in them.
Well, I think a lot of Black Bolt. He probably has a lot of. He knows how much destruction he could cause. So I think there's some moments with him that maybe if he says too much, that the repercussions of that, and as that scene is happening, Spider-Ham is given the opportunity to be the star of his own show as long as he forgets about trying to free his friends. That's what Mojo had kind of set him up for. And Spider-Ham is kind of teasing in there that he wants to see how hilarious the Black Bolt character is. And Mojo is basically getting him to talk. And finally, he says something. A simple hi just breaks all the glass. But I assume a lot of that is probably stemming to Black Bolt as a character overall of just always staying as silent as possible, knowing that the slightest action will destroy everything. So
yeah, he's one of these characters, like a lot of other characters, that are concerned about losing control of their powers and doing too much and harming stuff.
Which I understand. But it just seems like I've only seen Black Bolt and Black Colt in a few different things, and every time I see them, someone has to tell them at a moment that is kind of common sense to just say a light word. Say the letter A. You don't have to say a
Just whisper a little bit.
Just break a few pieces of glass. but yeah, I like this one. So.
Basically, like any Rambo movie where you know what Rambo's going to do eventually, but it's just the buildup of him knowing that he's like staying out of it until he absolutely has to do something, and then he unleashes
and then the body parts go flying.
So, yep. So yeah, we see all the glass break there, and the heroes are saved, and all of their tiny hands, their little hands, are attacking Mojo and taking him down, breaking the, kind of breaking the mold and allowing, once Dr. Kurtzstedt had said earlier, the other kings, the Council of Kings, finally bringing Kangaroo the Conqueror into the council there, and just kind of going into a portal, taking Mojo with them, and going off to wherever he's going to go until they write him into a story again. So,
yep.
But yeah, as any good comic does, they always have to leave it open for more, as they they'll tease the end. This doesn't have a question mark at the end, but it's always open for the next person to come through and tell a Spider-Ham story. A character that's most likely not going to have a continuous miniseries going on, but so it could be a while, maybe by the time the next Spider-Verse movie comes out.
Yes, because while it doesn't have the question mark, the words leading up to it kind of hint at that,
It's got exclamation.
But you'll soon find out it's never really the end.
The end. So yeah, I think maybe by the time Spider-Verse 2 hits theaters, it's probably going to be a good time to do another Spider-Ham story. So, but yeah, overall, I had a lot of fun with it. I agree as well with this issue being pretty entertaining. I probably liked issue 4 the most because I had that, was it the 89th meeting of the Kangs or something?
Yeah.
I just loved all of that stuff, and I thought that was really hilarious. So issue 4 was probably my favorite out of the bunch there. But yeah, I think too, especially since we've had a break with it, I think it would be interesting to go back and read it as a whole, just kind of really just...
Yeah.
Yeah.
having a couple months since that last issue is it took me a while to once I read the recap, and I'm like, okay, I'm starting to remember what happened, but ultimately with the comedic book, it's not that it's not important, but it was less important to remember all the finer details to enjoy it. You had the comedy to fall back on.
And it's funny because I didn't realize how long the recap was until you were actually reading it out loud.
Yeah, I was like,
and
I was
at
starting to
the end, I
lose
thought,
a
I was like, are you still reading the same thing? And I looked down at it, and I'm like, oh yeah, he is.
Yeah, I was starting to lose my breath there, and sometimes I'll cut it off, but I figured since it's been months, we deserved the entire synopsis. So. All right, and I assume, Jim, you didn't read it, right? Okay, so that way I didn't just moved on, and he's like, I had so much to say about Spider-Man. But yeah, okay, so any other closing thoughts? I'll take that as a no. All right, so we will close the book on the Spider-Ham miniseries for this club discussion, and we will return next week with, I believe, the final issue of the Ghostbusters, whatever that was called, year 1, right?
Yep.
So yeah, we'll have issue number 4 to close that one out next week. But stay tuned for our next segment for the weekly reviews. Okay. Saved. Recording. Okay, so here we go. Welcome to the weekly reviews. We're going to go around the table, the internet table, the digital table, and talk about what we've been reading. This one I was very excited for, the pre-order. There is a free comic book summer special that is coming out, I think, in September. Free Comic Book Day for 2020 has been turned into Free Comic Book Summer. So for anybody wondering what's happening, they're releasing those titles every week. They're doing a batch of them. This is going to be offered as a sample chapter, I believe, in September. But you can get the full hardcover now. I am talking about Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics. Let's see. An action-packed illustrated life in comic books. Creating and co-creating some of the most enduring superheroes and supervillains of all time, including Captain America, the Fantastic Four, the X-Men, Avengers, Iron Man, Black Panther, Thor, and the New Gods, would be enough to ensure legendary comic book master Jack Kirby a place in the upper echelon of comic book history. But Jack Kirby's life contained more than pencil lines, bombastic character designs, and one-of-a-kind story ideas. So this is what is described by author and artist Tom Scioli, who did the Fantastic Four grand design, by the way. If you read the X-Men grand design done by, I don't know if that was Ed Piskor, if that name's correct. And then Tom Scioli did the Fantastic Four one. If you read either of those, the entire life of Jack Kirby is done in that style, where it's a very rapid pace. It's still a pretty thick book. We're talking about almost 200 pages, but it is covering actually the long life of Jack Kirby, actually before him, covering with his parents, and then talking about the legacy after Jack Kirby has passed away. So a lot of it is crammed into 200 pages here, but it's very well done in that grand design style. It has an old pulpy paper type of approach to it. So it has some kind of like yellowing pages and things like that. What's super cool about this is that it really sheds a light on Jack Kirby. Thanks to the Marvel movies and the soapboxes in the comic books, Stan Lee is always one that is often the face of Marvel Comics, and rightfully so in the matter of always being the promoter, and just being the mascot of Marvel Comics. But when it comes down to the creations of all of these characters, a lot of that credit gets swept under the rug, as Jack Kirby, the artist and co-creator, throughout his entire life, basically didn't get the credit he deserved. And it wasn't until much later, when he was actually getting out of comics and getting into working in animation, is when he actually started getting big paychecks. And actually, there's a line in here that said that, like, oh wow, did a whole career in comics, and I'm finally starting to get paid for it, and he's starting to see the benefits and the acknowledgments and the awards and things like that. This is being told as a biography from Jack's point of view. It is taking from interviews that he's done and close sources to him. There's a lot of history on Jack Kirby and interviews and things like that. And there's only so much that can be done about somebody who is not here to tell his side of it. But during his lifetime, all the evidence is there. And Tom Scioli went through and really did the research to get all this together. And going back to the Stan Lee of it all, it doesn't shed a real good light on Stan Lee in that sense of how much credit was taken away. We have talked about this in the past, especially after Stan Lee's passing, just kind of going through some of that. And but this is a great book for those that, let's just say, are fans of Marvel movies and know Stan Lee, and they just kind of instantly think Stan Lee, Marvel. Picking up this book really sheds a whole new light on that, and I think will give you an appreciation, especially in the coming year or two with all these Marvel movies, some Jack Kirby 100% created things written and drawn. We have the Eternals for Marvel as well as New Gods, it's crazy that both of those things are coming from Marvel and DC right around the same time, and both are very Jack Kirby centric, and that'll be a cool thing. And going through this book, a couple things that I learned. I knew a lot about Jack, but a couple things: you see his time as a soldier in World War II. You see his struggle as an artist, going from publisher to publisher, back and forth, independence, Marvel, DC, and just kind of be thrown around. His ideas kind of getting, redrawn and just overlooked. But one cool thing that I didn't think I was going to take out of this book is that in the 90s, he was a guest star on the new Bob Newhart show, in which he played himself. And there's a comic book award ceremony that Jack was introducing an award for, and Bob Newhart was playing a comic artist in there. And Jim Lee's in there, Mark Silvestri's in there, Bob Kane's in there. It's like kind of crazy, just like how like this exists, and I never knew about it.
Bill Finger probably didn't, because
What's that?
Said, but Bill Finger probably wasn't involved in that.
Yeah, true. Bill Finger. There needs to be a book like this about Bill Finger.
Yeah, because he was sort of the same thing to a lesser degree, but I mean, obviously a very well-known characters created by him that he never got credit for until recently, and that of course is Batman. And
yeah, I just wanted to get that. So this drawing here, and this is the last thing I'll say about the book, is that throughout this entire book, it's an interesting style that Jack is being drawn almost like a Scott Pilgrim anime character throughout the entire life story, while everybody else is drawn on a pretty realistic looking, setup there. And it's interesting. I'm sure there's something deeper in that I'm just not smart enough to pick up on. Maybe it's sticking with the child at heart type of image of keeping him kind of looking young like that. But yeah, this is an absolute beautiful hardcover. Highly recommend. And it was a really good read. So yeah, that is Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics. A free sample chapter will be available, I think, September through the Free Comic Book Day Summer. Otherwise, you can order it right now for the entire graphic novel. All right. We will move on to Damon here for the next one, which is Midnight Sky number 5.
Yes, it was. Much delayed, not just with COVID, but this was due out even before COVID hit, I believe. But we finally got it. And it wasn't really worth the wait. This is more of the the setup for the next issue. Basically, just to keep this real quick, everyone throughout the different issues, this is where who's left, who survived, all get together, and they're going in for the big confrontation. And that, in a nutshell, is this whole issue. It was kind of boring in some parts. The little action there was kind of cheesy, just to get like a jump factor, I guess would be the best way to describe it. there was like one or two interesting things, but for the most part, this was just a kind of like a filler issue, just a way to get people that were in different parts of the country all together into the final battle. I think issue 6, I think, is the last one in this arc. We'll find out. So the next issue does look promising, and while this story overall was pretty good, I really need to revisit it because I think this started back in like October, September of last year, and we're only up to 5. So I heard all your horror stories for Doomsday Clock, and I'm really hoping this is not the next Doomsday Clock. But I have to revisit the previous issues. But yeah, this is the last issue is looking to be pretty good. So you kind of have to read this one because it explains how certain people are still alive and got to where they are. And that's basically what issue 5 is. It's just the transition into the finale.
So this is the penultimate
issue.
Good. All right, we'll move over to David for All-Star Squadron, issue number 4.
All right, and not that I'm going to talk about this whole series as I'm reading through it, but last time I talked about issues 1 through 3. It was the first story arc in the comic, but then I picked up 4 because I thought, well, I'll give the next story arc a try and see. And I got to say, for something that's so old, being from 81, but then being about like the 1940s and World War II era superheroes and things like that. I've really been enjoying reading, older stuff about even older stuff. So I think it's been entertaining. They've got a ton of characters in it, but they find a good way to kind of balance how they're using them. The first story arc was about them kind of gathering all these characters together. This one finds a way to pit them against each other, even though they're going after other villains, including the Japanese, because they had just bombed Pearl Harbor. But it introduces some ideas into this, the explanations in DC as to why didn't the superheroes, why didn't they go off and take out Hitler, or why didn't they go over to Japan and just end the war then? In comic book fashion, the explanations are quite simple, actually. It's because Hitler had the Spear of Destiny, and over in Japan, they had the Holy Grail. And so they use these as being these artifacts that empowered them to basically they use that in magic to make it so that any superheroes that would come within a certain area could be taken over and used against the Allies. And so that kind of happens in here as they sort of start to enter this area, and one by one, especially those characters who happen to be the strongest characters, but they're more susceptible to magic, and so they start to kind of fall, and all of a sudden they're talking about fighting against the United States, and they start going after and trying to kill their teammates who haven't fallen victim to this magic. And of course, some of them are strong-willed. Superman holds out for a good while there, but he realizes that he's having these conflicting thoughts. Like, on one hand, he wants to help his friends. On the other hand, he wants to kill them. So he's got that conflict, and he's trying to fight it. So he's kind of not doing anything while he's got this internal struggle going on, and that's how they kind of keep Superman out of it. And so some of these lesser powered or non-powered characters somehow have to fight off the more powerful characters, and finally figure out that if they get them out of this area, then they'll go back to normal and everything. But of course, it means that at least for the time being, these superpowered beings, the All-Star Squadron, the Justice Society of America, cannot go, to the east. They cannot get involved overseas against Hitler, and the Nazis. They cannot go against the Japanese on their own territory, because if they do, they'll fall victim to this and will be turned against the Allies. So this is kind of the comic that explained that. And I know that explanation had been used in other comics, both pre-crisis, and I think a similar explanation had been given, post-crisis, as to why there were no superpowered characters. Why didn't these superpowered beings just go over and wipe out the Nazis or whatever? And so they came up with the story to explain why that was. Unfortunately, in the DC universe, they didn't have Indiana Jones going and finding the Spear of Destiny and the Holy Grail and stopping the Nazis.
All right. We will jump over into the Spider-Verse with Spider-Gwen.
When I bought that big box of comics where they came out to about $1.20 a piece, I seen the Spider-Gwen #1, and I liked the cover, so I figured I'd check it out. And they had 2, 3, and 4 also, real cheap. So I figured, what the heck, gives me a little bit of a storyline. So I went ahead and bought this, and the synopsis for this is: as a teenager, Gwen Stacy went to a demonstration on radioactivity and was bitten by a mutated spider. The bite transformed her, granting her amazing powers of precognitive awareness of danger, adhesive fingertips and toes, and the proportional speed and strength of a spider. To the residents of New York, she is the dangerous vigilante called Spider-Woman, but you know her as Spider-Gwen. My brain, of course, didn't click right off the bat about the different multiverses. So I was kind of confused and getting a little frustrated when I'm reading about Frank Castle being a cop after all the Peter Parker stuff. It's like, oh, wait a minute. Punisher did stuff back in the Spider-Man days and all that, so I was thrown off at first. But by the time I hit issue 3, it's like,
Earth 65, right?
But yeah, it's I liked the storyline. It was fun and everything. I don't know if I'll keep going with it or not, but I liked Spider-Ham in here better than I did in his little series, even though this was a fake Spider-Ham that she was imagining when she hit her head and stuff. But she takes on the Vulture. The Vulture in here is he's actually more of a aggressively mutated character. He's not more of a cartoony character like you would expect with them and from the other Spider-Mans and stuff. But yeah, this was a good read. I was happy with it.
Good. All right, let's jump over to Doctor Strange, Surgeon Supreme, issue number 5.
Number 5. I'm really enjoying the switch in Doctor Strange now that we have him as the Surgeon Supreme rather than as the Sorcerer Supreme. There's a lot of interesting things that go with him now having to juggle his life. Before, all Doctor Strange had was magic work that he had to do. Now he's got to be a surgeon while he's also trying to save the universe. And they expect him to be there when he's supposed to do surgery. It's also interesting that they introduced that his boss is Dr. Druid, who has entered back into the medical world as well. And I think that makes for an interesting dynamic that they're together, and now the one who was the Sorcerer Supreme is taking orders from someone who didn't quite make the cut for that. So that makes a kind of interesting sort of back and forth. And the most recent plot line is someone has stolen Doctor Strange's forge for making mystical weapons. And he's trying to figure out who is, because they're also selling them now on the black market. And so he has to keep taking down criminals who have these amazing mystical weapons that have been made. And this time I thought it was just, I love the cover. Welcome to the Bizarre Bazaar. he goes to this bazaar in a kind of different dimension where all the mystical beings go searching for stuff. So it's filled with all kinds of characters who are from differing dimensions, from hell dimensions, all trying to buy things in this bazaar. And he's found out that this is where the weapons are being sold. And so he's closing in on who's done it. I'm not going to give away the rest because it's really surprising who it turns out to be has stolen the forge. Even though there were some hints of it in some earlier issues of Iron Man. It's really fast. I wouldn't have expected who it was.
That's funny because I was jokingly going to say Iron Man. It's Tony. And then that person has a trap set for Doctor Strange, but Doctor Strange has a trap set for them. And so you get to find out who traps who and what's coming up next.
Maybe it's the Trapster. That's one of the villains.
So, I mean, there's a lot of interesting movement in this particular series. We get some really interesting movements into other dimensions. We haven't seen this Doctor Strange for a bit. This more cosmic level Doctor Strange. And so it's fun to be back there and to see it mixed with his work as a surgeon, considering that's what led him into being Doctor Strange in the first place, was his loss of his surgical skills. Now that he has those back, he finds himself in conflict a lot. So I'm really enjoying the run with Doctor Strange, Surgeon Supreme, and it's not too late to jump into the story. I don't know if any of you guys are reading it so far.
I haven't, no.
You're missing something.
Good. Yeah, so with issue number 5, then there's probably going to be a trade paperback right around the corner. So.
Yep, I would guess.
Good. All right, let's jump over to Katie with Black Widow, the finely woven thread.
Okie dokie. So, yes, I have a trade paperback called Black Widow, the finely woven thread. It's written by Nathan Edmondson, and the art is by Phil Noto. And our good buddy, VC's Clayton Cowles, is doing the lettering. So, I know Black Widow from the Avengers movies, and I really like that character. I'm happy she's finally getting her own movie. But I never really read a Black Widow comic book, so I picked this up at a library sale. And I really liked this book a lot. First of all, it is really, really well drawn. I like that quite a bit. I enjoyed that. And I liked the story. So it is a pretty basic spy story, but it's a good one. And I feel like when you hit the basics of a spy, definitely could see this being made into a movie or a TV series. But I also liked that we see some depth of character to Black Widow, that she's not just, kicking butt and taking people down, which there's plenty of. But we find out her motivation is that she feels...
Uh-oh.
Did we lose her? Did Black Widow take her out because she was revealing too much about her secret plan?
I think so.
So, yeah, normally when this happens, her screen... So, yep. A lot of times her screen will just go away.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Are you hearing me?
Now we can hear you.
Now we are.
Okay, yeah, Black Widow tried to get me, but I saw them just in time, so I ran. Truly, I don't know why this only happens with Zoom. I played D&D on Facebook Messenger last night for 4 hours, and it was fine. And I use MS Teams every day, and it's fine. But that's enough for another day.
Hydra.
So, well, I like this book a lot. The premise is Black Widow feels a lot of guilt for all the things she did as a KGB agent, and is not taking a profit for the jobs that she does. She makes enough money to pay her bills, and then everything else is nonprofit, and that money goes into funds for families of people that she had interacted with and been hired to eliminate while a KGB assassin. So that was pretty interesting. I wouldn't say she's a good person per se. I think she's actually kind of an amoral person, but she's doing something good, trying to make her past. And there's a very interesting story in here where she frees someone from prison who was wrongfully convicted. But when she gets him out and gets into his escape helicopter, she finds out, well, he was wrongfully convicted for that crime, but it turns out he's a drug lord and runs a prostitution ring for at-risk people, and takes them out in this epic way. That was pretty cool. And a lot of really action in here. I don't think you have to know a ton of Black Widow to appreciate this book. She's a spy, and she does spy-y things. And I think I'm actually going to get the next volume of the series because it was really good. It collects Black Widow from 2014, number 1/6, and some material from kind of like a preview or a sample issue from All New Marvel Now .1, number 1. But, I liked this. It was great. A good introduction to Black Widow in comic books. The Finely Woven Thread by Edmondson and Noto. That's my review.
Excellent, thank you. We're going to jump over to something I'm very interested in to see if this is about the actress Hilary Swank or not. But Jim, we have Swanking number 1?
No. Swan King.
Well, according to your Facebook, this might be a Celebrity Jeopardy mishap, but your Facebook post said Swanking number 1.
Okay.
Swan King number 1.
Although going with the Swan theme, it is black and white, so the art is all solid color. But and it wasn't particularly great art. It was okay art, but it's nothing. I've seen better black and white art done. However, it was a nice story. It's from Alterna Comics. It was a $1 one-shot. And it's from Tyler Wetland and Wes Loker, who are names that you see all over Alterna Comics. They're prolific creators for them. But like I said, it was a good story. It was a king who enjoys, after a hard day, he enjoys going out on the pond in front of his castle and spending time with the swans that swim there. One day, the swans are gone. So he ends up paddling upstream as far as he can until he comes across a water nymph and asks, what's going on? What happened to everything? The fish are dead. The swans are gone. And she tells him, you have to go upstream and find out why, but you have to be steadfast in your commitment to this. He goes upstream and he finds a depressed giant who crashed down in the middle of a stream, and that kind of like blocked the flow of water and poisoned the fish, and which killed it, ended up chasing off the swans. The dwarf, or the giant, is depressed because he was given a challenge to a trickster goat god far up the mountain and was deceived. So the king has to be steadfast in his mission, go up there and defeat the goat god, which he does, which he returns. He has to have a face-to-face discussion with the giant about why he shouldn't hate them, and how the king is going to forgive them and remember about the giant because of this. And then the nymph says, you did well, and he goes home, paddles up the stream, and there's the swans again. Like I said, just a very nice story. I just wish the art was a little more something there for it, But otherwise, for a $1 book, there's nothing absolutely wrong with what you get. You get your money's worth out of it.
Cool.
Like I said, I think I did it last time. I just recently got a whole bunch of Alterna books from their yearly subscription. I got my first packet a couple weeks ago. And that was one that should have been out in March, but I just got. So good to see it.
Okay.
Now, when you go back and listen to this podcast, and it gets to this part where Jim's talking about this, imagine that Jim is telling a joke. As I was listening to you do this review, I realized that your delivery is a lot like somebody who's telling a joke and you're waiting for the punchline. So but there's no punchline.
Well, hopefully they'll have interest and they'll want to do Swanking number 2. All right. Now, on to our next review is actually going to be from Eric. And thanks to the internet technology, he sent me a pre-recorded review for the issue Bleed Them Dry, issue number 1. So I'm going to share the Swanking number 1. Share the screen. I can't say it again. And here
Is
is
the squeen
Eric.
related to the swanking?
No, it's the Swanking Squeen. All right. Here is Eric for Bleed Them Dry number 1.
Hello all, Eric here. Just got a comic in I wanted to share this week. Bleed Them Dry number 1 from Vault Comics. Story takes place in the year 3333, very easy to remember, in a post-apocalyptic world that is now in the stage of recovery. Oh, also, as it turns out, vampires exist, and they can survive with a manufactured blood substitute. Well, they are able to take from humans, if the human consents, of course. But essentially, this seems to be a crime story. It takes place in an engineered megacity, through which a lot of the recovery efforts are coordinated. Starts out with Detective Harper Holloway, who's basically investigating a string of vampire murders with her vampire partner, Atticus. So far up to this point, all their leads have gone cold. They've had to kill people who could have been witnesses because they were attacking. So, basically they're like at their wits' end. However, Detective Holloway's partner, Atticus, apparently seems to crack the case using some shady contacts. And, for most people, this would be, all wrapped up, but Detective Holloway doesn't quite sit right with her. And so her further investigation into the matter brings the end of the first issue to a really nice cliffhanger. Now, one thing I like about the story, it definitely borrows a lot of elements from existing stories, such as the Judge Dredd megacity, but also has the culture of, the Sookie Stackhouse series, where vampires are real, they're alongside us, they have their own police, they, as long as they behave, no problem with them existing next to us. One thing I like about this is that, you can just jump into the story without having to have a long, exposition. So you're able to start that out. Also really like the art. I mean, it seems to be very colorful and drab at the same time. Good page. Little blood there. I mean, vampires, of course, right? So right now I have to say this first issue, it's done a good job of setting the stage. There's a lot of the story that's going to happen that I'm really looking forward to finding out, because right now all I have is questions and no answers. So can't wait to check it out again. Leave Them Dry from Vault Comics. Talk to you guys later.
Cool. Before you go, Eric, I had some questions that maybe you'll have answers for. So I have 15 questions. Can you answer them? All right. This is a pre-recorded video. He's not going to reply. So. Okay. So, he's still moving. Okay, he's gone. So there we go. For anybody who is unable to make it to the club, know that is an option that works. It was pretty easy. He sent me the video. I brought it up to my laptop, had it all set up. So
the only thing
and audio
what the video was missing is it should have started out with, if you're watching this, I've been murdered by vampires.
Or else little blood stains kind of dripping down the screen when he starts.
Yeah, that someone should check on him, actually, now that I think about it. Okay, jumping over to my next review here, I am going back to read The Tick. I believe this is from the original 1989 series. This particular copy is from a 10th anniversary, which, by the way, says 86 to 96, but I think the act that started with the newspaper strips probably. But anyways, The Tick arrived straight. The Tick arrived straight from the nut house and into the city. The city is the city. That is the name of the city. Is the city, where he decides to be a superhero. After having a tussle with ninjas and being run over by a train, he is no closer to realizing his lofty goals. This was a lot of fun. I picked up a lot of the Tick issues from the Crimson Rummage sale, and I started putting them all in order. Decided to do a read. Some of them are rereads, some aren't. But this is kicking off right from the beginning of the Tick in a nut house, breaking out, having this idea that he is a superhero. He, once again, he is, as the synopsis said, he is battling some ninjas. But what I really liked most about these first couple issues, jumping into issue number 2 here, you see him tussling with a very familiar looking character with a little, what do they call that? The hair twirl thing. What's the official term, David?
Spit curl.
Good girl.
Yes, the spit curl. There's a character by the name of Clark Oppenheimer. He is a reporter at the what I think is called the Weekly World News, or Planet rather, and
My invulnerable.
he
Sorry, I
is.
didn't steal that from you.
That's all right. There is a moment in here that the Tick goes undercover because he wants to get in and figure out more about this superheroic character that is in the city, this Clark Oppenheimer. So the Tick does this perfectly because he purchases this this flashy tie that he's wearing there. This art is presented in the original black and white presentation, but he has this flashy tie, and he thinks that's enough that's going to distract people. When people realize that he is this giant blue Tick costume hero, you're like, well, don't you see my like flashy tie? Isn't that, you know, distracting you? So yeah, there's a great scene where they go into the editor-in-chief of the Weekly World Planet, which is Perry Beige, is his name. There's a scene where Perry Beige is talking about needing to get wants a scoop, wants to figure out who the superhero is, and the whole time the Tick is just standing there next to Clark Oppenheimer, just like pointing, and he's just like, you know, he's like, he's right here, this is him, you guys don't realize it. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. I read the first 6 or so issues. There was a couple, I think I only needed 2 out of the original 12 for my run, so those are waiting for me in the mail. But it sparked a Tick being a big fan with the action figure back in the day, which I will show off right away, my original Tick action figure that I had back in 1994. And so yeah, I'm rereading the comics and then lining up the DVDs.
Is that the one that if you push down on him, he springs up?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. I got that one as well, yes.
He's got that little like
Right.
shelf in the
You
back.
kind of put your thumb on to push him up and let him bounce up in the air.
So in addition to going through the comics, I will be soon diving into the first animated series, the first live action series, and the very most recently wrapped Amazon series live action as well. So there's going to be a lot of Tick happening in in the next month here. So
Just a warning to those with kids, the Tick was actually the first black and white comic book that my son David got his hands on. There were
really
crayons involved. You know, black and white. It's like a coloring book, right?
awesome. Yeah, I had a friend that did that with the original Ninja Turtles comics where he colored them in. So yeah, then the coolest thing is how the Tick started off as a mascot for a comic book store newsletter in New England, and they just started, you know, throwing them into this newsletter, and then they did little comic strips, and then here we are, you know, many iterations later. And the coolest thing is that the creator Ben Edlund, who would go on to do a bunch of TV shows and producing and stuff, including Firefly, Ben Edlund is the one that is spearheaded each iteration of the television show, which is something that really doesn't happen when you have the comic creator have his hands, especially throughout the decades, in all of these very different versions of his characters. So Ben Endled's awesome. The Tick is awesome. As Dr. Kurtzstad said, spoon. So, yeah, that is my review on the original Tick from the late 80s. I'll just say that. All right, we're going to jump over for the next title here from David, which is Superman versus Spider-Man.
Yes. Superman versus the Amazing Spider-Man. That's right in the title, The Amazing Spider-Man. It's not just Superman versus Spider-Man. Superman versus the Amazing Spider-Man.
Amazing Spider-Man.
Yes. So in this book, I'm trying to remember when this was from. Jointly published by Marvel Comics and DC Comics. The copyright on this is 1995, but I thought this was actually older than that. And that might just be for this one because it's a second printing. Because this is clearly a pre-Crisis on Infinite Earth Superman for dating things. So I was thinking this was actually done much earlier than that, but the copyright in here says 95. So we have the way that this one is set up. You have a few prologues. Prologue number 1 is a short story of Superman, and there's a giant robot that is basically piloted by his arch nemesis Lex Luthor. Once again trying to stop Superman, but failing miserably as he does every time. Superman's able to defeat him eventually, and fighting off Lex Luthor. Lex has all kinds of tricks up his sleeve and whatever, but in the end, he's captured, and Superman hauls him off to jail. We then have now a pause for our hero identification, and they give you some things about his powers and origin, and then it's followed by prologue number 2, which is a little bit of a Spider-Man story. Spider-Man taking on Dr. Octopus, and much like the Superman thing, they battle, and eventually, Spidey is able to defeat Doc Ock, as he usually does, and sending him off to jail, so that you have yet another pause for hero identification, and just a little bit of a quick recap of Spidey's origin and powers. I guess that sets it up. If you've never read a Spider-Man book, or you've never read a Superman book, maybe you're a Marvel reader and you aren't, only read Marvel in a closet, so you're not familiar with who Superman is, or something like that. Gives you a little recap. Well, then we get a prologue 3, which is Lex Luthor and Dr. Octopus together for the first time anywhere. Yep, it is a story of the two of them in prison together, which they decide to team up and escape together. And then we get another pause, this time for our villains, that gives just a little bit of information on Doc Ock and Lex Luthor and their abilities. Okay, so now that we know all of our major players, we can get into the actual story. So the setup for this is, of course, we've got to get Superman and Spider-Man and all these characters in the same place. And we do that. Of course, the villains are already together because they were in prison together and escaped together. But we are able to get our heroes together because, of course, Peter Parker is a photographer for the Daily Bugle, and Clark Kent, is a reporter. So, of course, we have a what do they call it? It's some sort of news conference. The World News Conference, located in New York. which of course gets Clark Kent and Lois Lane to New York, to the same conference that, of course, Peter Parker is at. So this gets them together, and eventually we get some action between the two of them. Like most superhero team-ups, it starts off with a misunderstanding. So we get several pages of Superman versus Spider-Man, and you might think right off the bat, like, well, Spidey's great, but he doesn't stand a chance against Superman. I mean, you throw this into one of Jacob's birthday battles, and I'm pretty sure that we're all going to agree that in the end, Superman's going to defeat Spider-Man. Now,
Kryptonite webbing.
Yeah, kryptonite webbing.
Well, we have, in this case, Spidey gets a little help from Lex Luthor and Dr. Octopus, and they shoot him with a red sun ray, which affects... I don't think it really affects him so much as it affects Superman as he's fighting him. So it kind of evens the match a little bit, Spidey's able to land a few good blows on Superman, and that goes on for a little bit. And Spidey seems like he's got the upper hand. He's kind of whipping Superman. But it turns out that the rays are a little bit temporary. So by the time they get to the end of the battle, they've worn off, and Spidey's about broken his hands on Superman, which is all it takes, as it turns out, to get them to decide, hey, maybe we should team up instead. So there's not even really a good, this is why we should team up. It's just that I'm not even completely clear on how the fighting really began. They just decided that, for the story's sake and for the excitement and whatever, we'll just fight each other until we decide that we fought each other long enough, and then we'll be friends. We'll shake hands and team up together. And that, of course, puts them together. And then Dr. Octopus and Lex Luthor have this devious plan to take over the world. Superman and Spider-Man team up to stop them. And naturally, they're, well, I don't want to give away the ending and say that they're victorious, but yeah, we know how it ends. So there you go. They're carting them off to prison again, so that perhaps they could come back for a sequel, or maybe the sequel will feature some other villain. I don't know. Who knows, right? Maybe we'll find out sometime. But that's Superman versus the Amazing Spider-Man from Marvel Comics and DC Comics.
Cool. All right. Let's take a break from those two characters and jump over to Zombies Assemble 2.
All right. At the Great Comic Book Purge, I grabbed Zombies Assemble 2. It was a run of 4. I am grabbing anything I can find a deal on that's Marvel Zombies, and this is a manga version. The desperate race to cure the zombie outbreak shifts into high gear. Caught in a massive explosion, Captain America, Hawkeye, and Iron Man wake up in the midst of a city overrun by zombies. Miraculously, they haven't been turned, and they find themselves face to face with a mysterious scientist who claims to have a cure for the virus. But who is he really? And does he actually possess the antivirus that Bruce Banner has been struggling to create? More important, is the Hulk immune to the zombie plague? This is fun. It's the U.S. versions of writing. It's basically kill everything, destroy everything, and everything. The Asian version of writing, they actually give you a little hope that things can be taken care of. You can find a cure, and you can do things. If anybody read any of the regular Marvel Zombies, basically everybody dies. Everybody turns into a zombie and all that. But in here, you got Well, like they said, those characters were in here: Iron Man, Captain America, Hulk, and Hawkeye. You also had Thor and Black Widow in here. And scientists, a couple of them come across is Jasper Scott. It is in black and white, and it's got that manga style look to it.
Well, don't talk too much about Black Widow because we don't want your audio to go out.
Yeah. And of course, with it being an Asian version, you got to read it from back page on. And of course, with my dumb brain again, I basically did it right. I did start it with the back page, but then I read from the left page to the right. And I'm like, well, this ain't making no sense. And then I looked in the front, and it gives you a little cheat sheet how to read it. And then I'm like, oh, shit, I wasn't even thinking about the word balloons. Once I was doing it right, I still read the word balloons wrong. So once I got it down pat, I did good. And once I got done with this, then I had a problem reading my next comic book from front to back. So I had to read it. But yeah, you got all the characters in here. There's zombies everywhere. Dr. Scott, he helps them all with some things, but yeah, he's got the virus in hand, and he's got a bunch of people locked away in a room that he's giving the disease to, and he can basically control anybody that he gives the virus to because he was infected a while back with the original virus. So he's basically patient zero in the scenario. But yeah, you got cures for the viruses between the two doctors. You got more viruses being formed up and put out, stronger viruses. It's a fun look at it. Lots of zombies. All the characters pretty much get infected and go through their scenarios and fight it out. But this actually was a fun, more lighthearted look at it instead of just seeing everybody die. So I don't want to tell you who all lives or dies, but that's for you to find out yourself. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that's been long enough. Let's hear more about Superman and Spider-Man.
Yes. And you wanted to know, did they get back together? Yes, they do. And you're right. Different villains in this one. In this one, we have Dr. Doom and the Parasite. What I found fascinating when I first started to read this was in modern continuity, and this only took place in 1995, Metropolis and New York are not in the same world. But in this world, yes, Metropolis and New York are in the same world. And the story starts out with J. Jonah Jameson telling Peter Parker, you know, I'm sick of Spider-Man, go get some stories on Superman. And sends him to New York to get some pictures of the real hero. You know, Spider-Man is not the real hero. So Peter goes off to
He's
New
a
York.
menace.
Yes, he's a menace. He's a jerk. So Peter's already feeling kind of down as he goes off to New York City and gets pictures of Superman beating up a villain there, not realizing that Dr. Doom is actually using this whole thing going on with Superman at the time to break the parasite out of prison. So he can use him in his nefarious plot to take over the world. In the meantime, after Peter gets some nice shots of Superman, he goes out at night just to blow off some steam and to capture some crooks. And as he does, the police show up and try to arrest him. And he becomes even more, well, what is it about me that's so bad? Well, everybody loves Superman. Everybody hates Spider-Man. Even here in New York City, I don't get a break. And so the story really unfolds in some ways with this whole plot going on with Dr. Doom and the parasite. And the reason Dr. Doom has gotten the parasite out of prison is because he's one of the people who can stop Superman. Dr. Doom knows that eventually, if he's going to take over the world, he's got to get rid of Superman. And so eventually we get the whole thing where Superman comes to Dr. Doom and eventually is beaten by the parasite. At the time, Peter is following him as Spider-Man, and they get to the secret place where they are, and Peter runs into Superman again. They've run into each other a couple times so far in the comic, and Superman says, well, why don't you just stay here? I'll go take care of it. And Peter's like, well, guess he doesn't need me. At first, he's just going to let Superman go and handle it. He's better at this than me. But finally, he has one of his moments where Peter's struggling with his inner demons and says, but I have to do what's right, even if I'm not the number one superhero. So he ends up following Superman in, and it turns out that Dr. Doom has used the parasite to capture Superman, and now has him under a green kryptonite ray, and is siphoning off all Superman's power to the parasite, who he actually has entrapped then to get rid of the parasite once he's sucked off all Superman's powers. Because he doesn't want the parasite to get in his way while he's taking over the world. But Spider-Man shows up, also gets captured, but as he watches Superman being drained of his powers, Spidey uses his webs to coat his body so that the rays aren't bothering him as much, and finally Superman can break away. And the two together manage to stop Dr. Doom and the parasite. And actually, one of the neat things in the story is too that because they're trying to, at the beginning of the story, trace where the bad guys are, Peter decides to become a member of the Daily Planet. And Clark goes over and becomes a part of the Daily Bugle. And so we get this kind of transfer of the two between the two departments to Jameson's so excited that Clark Kent has come to work for him, but turns out to be the typical J. Jonah Jameson jerk, even to Clark Kent. While Peter's getting much nicer treatment now over at the Bugle. So you might expect, the Daily Planet, so you might expect he wants to stay there, but he gets homesick. And at the end, they swap back to their appropriate papers. So it's really neat to see this kind of, it's not just Superman and Spider-Man meeting and fighting bad guys and fighting each other, but there's this kind of switching lives for a while and seeing, well, what's it like in the other person's shoes to a certain extent. Peter realizing, I'm not going to be any better off if I go to New York City than I am or in Metropolis than New York City. So he heads back home to...
The kryptonite's not always greener.
On the other side, it is not. But I thought it was really fun. Like I say, it took me a while at first kind of to go, you mean Metropolis and New York are the same world? But once I got past that little continuity glitch.
and in this one, Superman, Clark Kent actually had comments on New York, how he doesn't like New York. It's just criminals and stuff for him.
Why did you accidentally say Superman when you wanted to say Clark Kent? Or why are those two even
Why are those two connected? Aren't they different people?
Well, of course.
But it was a fun sort of, there's enough action for it to be, for the action people, a good comic, but also some real reflection on who these characters are and where they, their own struggles with their realities as superheroes. So it was, in that way, I kind of like the trading places element.
Good. Since we've had many weeks without you, Dr. Kurtstad, and you have a time limit, let's actually hit up your next one. So Firefly number 17, if you will.
Okay, Firefly number 17. This is the most recent series in the Firefly series. We've had leading up into this, what you had was Mal and the group ended up in the middle of a battle between old Federation forces and old Browncoats, which finally got resolved. And in the process, to keep everybody out of trouble, Mal has become the sheriff, which is, for Mal, a really difficult role to play. So he's trying to track down a murderer who's killing people while at the same time trying to keep his crew from being arrested for being bandits and stealing stuff from the corporation. All kinds of tricky sort of mixes kind of ensue in this. He's also working with his frenemy Moon,
Boss Moon.
Boss Moon. She's kind of like his deputy, I guess, who's wandering around with him. But it's interesting that now really all of Mal's group has been targeted by the corporation to be eliminated through robots that they have sent out. And at the end, Mal is trying to figure out now, how do we all get out of here without getting caught? And so, I mean, to me, this has been really great because it really is in the flavor of the show Firefly. They've done a wonderful job, I think, of continuing the characters, the very kind of way the show flowed within the Firefly books that they're putting out now. If you allow me real quick too, I'll also go on to one of the other ones I had was Firefly Sting. This was a trade of, I don't know whether this was a graphic novel or a trade.
Yeah,
Actually, I
graphic
think it's
novel.
What? Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
novel, graphic novel. It focuses on the female characters in Firefly who Saffron blackmails. And if you'll remember, any of you are big on the show, Saffron was Mal's wife at one time, now has a thing in getting even with Mal. And so she tricks all the women of the Firefly crew to pull a heist with her. And all kinds of craziness ensues in the midst of this heist. And we also find out some really interesting secrets about each of the women who's a part of the Firefly crew. So for Firefly fans, I think this is just a really incredible story that takes us deeper into some of the characters. And so if you're a Firefly fan, be sure to get this book.
Agreed. Strange Academy #2.
Strange Academy #2. Number 1 introduced us to the fact that Doctor Strange and various other mystical masters have put together an academy for all the young magicians and magic users of the multiverse to come and learn to do their craft without killing people. So what we have in this is we get to see the students' first day of classes, where they get to do everything from meet a zombie to learn about the layers of hell, and to getting in trouble, get sent there. And all the other mystical things they are learning within the school. And it was just to see these kids, go through these classes is just, it's really a wonderful story. I don't want to ruin it for anyone, but if you're interested in what it might look like for a bunch of magic using kids to go through a school that is nothing like Hogwarts,
Yeah.
you will enjoy this comic.
Yeah, myself and Eric have been talking off air about how much we like it, and I do want to share that 8th period has Man-Thing teaching a
Yes.
science class. So
Yep. And
Nice.
botanicals.
awesome book.
So that's a really great thing. And the last one I have, and then I'm going to have to run away, I'm afraid,
After
is
you answer to the question.
what?
After you throw an answer to the question.
What was that? I missed the question. Oh.
If you had a neighbor living next to you.
Oh, okay. If I had a neighbor who was coming, let's see, I would not want to live next to Tony Stark. Not because I don't like Tony Stark, but a lot of things come to Tony Stark's direction that I don't want in my neighborhood.
It's going to be very wild.
I don't need to have my neighborhood blowing up every couple days or anything like that. So Tony Stark would not be among my number one choices for a neighbor. Neighbor I would really like to have is the pair from Fairly Odd Parents. To get a few wishes would might be a nice thing. And I'm sure those wishes would come with some really interesting adventures as well.
Nice.
But my last comic is Star Trek Year 5, number 11. The reason I wanted to introduce this is I don't know how many Star Trek fans listen into the show. But this was really great because they brought back a character from the original TV show that was really a wonderful character when they first introduced it, and now really leads to some problems for the Enterprise crew. They bring back Gary 7 and his black cat, who is actually a woman who switches back and forth between the two. A human who has been taken by futuristic aliens, retrained, given tools, and now is in control of keeping history in line. That's what this department is about. And they've decided that the Enterprise crew is getting in the way of the way the time stream ought to go. And so now he's been sent back to eliminate the Enterprise crew who he worked with at one time. Oh, David's saying something, but I can't hear him.
Sorry. I was going to say, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember this correctly, wasn't his appearance in Star Trek kind of a backdoor pilot?
Yeah, he did have a short-lived series called Gary 7. That was a spin-off from Star Trek, but I think it only had maybe a half dozen to a dozen episodes before it went under. I'm not sure it's how easy it is even to get those episodes anymore, but he really is a fascinating character, and to have him show up in this for Star Trek fans, I think will be a really neat thing. And it's been interesting, in this is the first issue where he's really actively doing anything. To see him up against the Enterprise crew, when he really has most of the advantages. He's got all these futuristic sort of things that he can use. They actually put up a pretty good fight. If you're a big Star Trek fan, Star Trek Year 5 as a whole has been a really great series, I think, for people who were fans of the original Star Trek series. They trace a lot of elements from that original series and give us some really interesting stories, because the series really, we get at the beginning of each episode, it's 5-year mission to explore strange. Well, the show only gave you the first 4 years. So at least we're getting the 5th year now in these comics, and they've done a good job, I think, in taking you to some new places.
Right, and there's a little bit of bridging going on, connecting the show to the movies. Mm-hmm. As you have Kirk, who's been told once he gets back, he's being promoted and everything. So kind of leading into what we see years later in Star Trek the Motion Picture and into the other movies.
Yeah. And another neat part of this particular issue is there's a moment, Spock had to take command of the ship for a while Kirk was unconscious. And some really huge events happen in that time. And so there's a point at which they come together and Kirk says, "This is your command review," because acting as commander, he now is reviewed his whether he's worthy of having his own command. Mm-hmm. And Kirk says, "You did exactly what you were supposed to do, and I give you." But Spock is really struggling with the choices that he made, and can't seem to hear Kirk's affirmation that, yes, stuff happened that was difficult, but you did what a captain has to do. That's what this is about.
And kind of, just despite kind of knowing that there wasn't anything else that he could have done. He also feels that he could have done better.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Kirk, and the whole confrontation then ends with Kirk saying, "My report stands. You are worthy of command." And Spock saying, "Well, then I will put in a counter report, saying that I don't believe that that's the case." And so we're left with this kind of incomplete sort of moment that these two have when suddenly Seven shows up and kind of throws everything into chaos. And in fact, I'm giving way too much of the story away, but it's still, to read the whole thing is really a powerful and fascinating story, I think. They have to evacuate the Enterprise at one point, and Kirk says, "You are in charge of the crew. It's your job to make sure that they're all safe," because he plans to stay behind as the only person to take on Gary 7 on the Enterprise. And so, again, he affirms his belief that Spock is the one who can take command. And we'll see then, as you said, this is a bridge to the movies. Ultimately, Spock does have a command of Spock's own. So I've really loved the Star Trek 5.
Not before leaving Starfleet, though.
What?
But not before leaving Starfleet.
That's right. Not before leaving Starfleet.
So we'll see, how this goes.
Yep. So thank you for having me today. Sorry I have to run off, but
Glad to have you back, and
life's too full. Take care, everyone. Have a good day. Good evening.
All right, let's jump back over to Katie with Manifest Destiny, volume number 1.
Thank you. Yes, this is from Image Comics. Volume 1's titled Flora and Fauna, written by Chris Dinges, pencil and inks by Matthew Roberts, colorist Owen Gianni, and letterist Pat Brousseau. So this is a historical fiction book centered around Lewis and Clark's expedition out west to explore the Louisiana Purchase. The kind of concept behind that and philosophical thought was called Manifest Destiny. Do want to stress that this is fiction. I understand that Manifest Destiny I love the colors in this story. They're very, very well done, really pretty, great. Kind of the concept is, as we know, Lewis and Clark are going out west to investigate the Louisiana Purchase, but while they're there, they're told to look out for monsters. So their official mandate still is go out, explore, document all the animals you see, all the people you meet, all the plants you find. But while they're out there, they also find monsters. A really cool way to start is they see a giant arch, and it's not the arch you think, but an arch made out of plants next to a river. So that's pretty familiar to modern readers. They find a half buffalo, half minotaur creature that's like 7-8 feet tall, and it's terrorizing people. And then they get to a village that was supposed to be where they were meeting up contacts. While there, they're attacked by people made into plant monsters. So kind of Plants versus Zombies, but we have plant zombie that are fighting everyone, and if you get bitten, it can be ugly for you. So another historical figure, Sacagawea, shows up in here too, and she is a kick-butt monster fighter. We haven't heard a ton from her yet, but I expect we'll see more in this series. And yeah, that's a pretty good summary of this book. I will say Lewis and Clark are not portrayed as heroes. They're not portrayed as villains. They are portrayed as, some pretty tough guys. Like, they're not necessarily the nicest people, but I think they're doing what they have to do. And they are accompanied by a crew of miscreants. Some are professional soldiers, some are criminals and convicts pressed into service. And yeah, it's pretty interesting. I picked this up also at the comic book rummage sale, and it was a good buy.
Cool.
It's comics.
Alrighty. Sounds good. We are going to jump over to Jim with Trespasser.
All right, this is another one of my Alterna books. This one is the 96-page special, which is collects, I believe it is the first 4 issues of this comic. This was a story that I skipped when it was originally out because when I started reading the Alterna books, this one is either completely done or just like an issue left, and they weren't all in the store. So it's like, if I'm not going to read the complete thing, I'm not going to read it at all. So I got it now, and this was a really great story. It is the story of a man and his daughter who are living in a post-apocalyptic situation, but instead of zombies or anything, they're just starved for food because radiation has affected almost everything. Most of the food is poisoned by radiation. He's out hunting. He can't use the animals he comes across, and he rescues, of all things, an alien who seems to be injured, takes him home, puts him in a spare bedroom, and starts to treat him. And while he's treating him, the alien reaches up, grabs him on the arm, and he later develops blisters or some kind of something on his arm from that. When the alien appears to have gotten better suddenly and tries to leave, we don't know what happens originally, but we just see the next morning that the man's cooking some meat for his daughter to eat, and she complains about the awful smell. And then we see the empty space suit out on the stump where they usually butcher the chickens. That's basically the first issue. And then how things develop from there. They get sick. He gets sicker. She gets sick. He gets better. And all of a sudden, she's at the point of dying, and a whole bunch of aliens show up and take her away. So we don't know what's going to happen to her, but all of a sudden she wakes up, not in a spaceship or in an alien building, but in a human military hospital with soldiers around her. And then they fade out from the hospital to the outside to the camp, and you see at the camp there's like a guard tower that's got an alien head on a spike, and there's aliens hung up on the wall, and it's like, okay, but how did she get there? And we don't see that. Then it jumps ahead a few years, and we see that same farm where the man and his daughter were living, but the man's much older, and somebody comes through the woods, and it's a young girl. Instead of being a girl, she's actually a young woman right now, and she has a mutated dog with her, and it is his daughter, and she's reunited with him. But we find, while he's hugging her, he sees a strange protrusion on the back of her head. She's now got some kind of horns growing up behind her ears. And that's basically where the story ends. And it was really strange. And it's like, what a cliffhanger. And it's like, this story has not been published for a couple of years. This has got to continue. No, and apparently it's going to.
Well, that's great, because fans, myself included, have been asking for that since the first miniseries came out. It remains, possibly my favorite Alterna book, since I started reading Alterna. There were a lot of people who asked for more. We were told, who knows, maybe down the road. When we had people breaking away from Alterna, the people who did this weren't among them. It would be great to actually see some sort of continuation, to maybe get some answers. And I would love for this to be more than just a 4-issue miniseries, and I mean, even just like a sequel to this would be great to have more than just a 4-issue miniseries. Either to have something that's a little bit more ongoing, or something just a little bit longer that not only gives us more, but also gives us answers to what we missed in between.
Yeah, because of Alterna's relationship with Diamond, they were kind of forced into like cutting up these ongoing series into like mini-series, so they're always putting out number ones. The editor, publisher, Peter Samedi, has commented on that since he's no longer with Diamond. that a lot of these are going to switch into ongoing series. He didn't specifically address this one, but he did say that it was coming back. I don't know exactly in what format or what, but yeah, so we will be getting more of that. And if I had read this a couple of years ago and found out there was no more, I would have been really disappointed because it is kind of a big cliffhanger to not finish off.
Cool. All right, next up, we're going to talk about some Archie comics. Oh, wait, Kirby's going to talk about some Archie comics.
What?
All right, I'm going to skip the synopsis. Anthony talked about this one a while back anyways, but Buddy and Veronica Vixens, I picked up 5 comic starter I don't know, this might be all the issues they ever did for it, but we got this at the Comic Book Purge too. It's basically more adult version of the characters, and boys got themselves some motorcycles, and they're sitting there messing around with the gang. That's some local gang that's hanging around the area, and they end up basically chickening out and not doing what they should do, and so the girls get together and
You have to be careful when you say adult comics.
not that quite adult, but the girls get themselves some motorcycles, grab some more of the girls from Riverdale, and get themselves a little Vixens gang going together, and they go take care of the hoodlums themselves and chase them out of town their own little way. It was a fun story. If you're into Archie comic characters at all, you'll enjoy it. Then I came across one of the old Pep comics that I got way back in the day. This is a early one, which I believe would have been from my grandpa's pile of 20 center.
Ooh.
But these were always fun because I don't know if it is the basis of it or not. But every Pep comic I ever got was during the summertime, and they always focused on the kids' summer vacation plans and stuff like that. They're at the beach, at the pond, at the lake, whatever. Then there's other little character stories in here too. So that's a fun one to check out if you want something that's a little bit different other than just the whole school version of the Archie thing. And then since I knew Eric was going to finally be on, I read The Punisher Meets Archie. And it's got this nice little cutout with the Punisher skull, kind of like a Casper Archie face on top, and a little cutout cover there. But this was a fun story. The Punisher has a character that looks just like Archie that he's hunting down, and he's after him for doing some swindling, and the character runs off to Riverdale. He knows Veronica's dad and stuff, and they've done, I'm guessing, some business with each other or whatever. And so he's hiding out in Riverdale, and then the Punisher comes hunting him down, and so do some other gangsters. And of course, they see Archie first, and he looks just like him. So they start hunting Archie down, and then you can kind of figure how the story goes, but I don't want to spoil it away for you. But if you like Archie comics and you like throw a couple other characters to crossovers, this was a fun crossover. So,
And season 4 of the Riverdale TV show, they did the most legal version of that they could, and it's pretty fun to see once you see a guy who is basically hunting Archie, and he has a version of a skull on his shirt, but once again, the most legal version they could do of that. It was pretty entertaining.
And the Punisher does behave himself in this comic as much as possible. So.
Good. All right, Jim, Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey. Volume.
Oops. What did I do?
There we go. All right, this one was covered by the other guys a couple weeks ago, and it made me want to go get it, and I did. And I got this cover. I don't think I saw this one when they were talking about it, but this is kind of cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
But I just have to say, yeah, this was a really fun story. It's Amanda Conner and Jimmy Palmiotti, and they're writing like they were writing it back in the New 52. It's that old Harley Quinn stories. It's fun like that, but it also brings in. It has an air of the Harley Quinn Birds of Prey movie without being exactly like the characters were in the movie. They're more current comic characters taking over that role. But the fun is there from the movie. You know, it's like taking off after the movie was over, basically, you know, and where the characters would have been. like going back to their own life and everything. This did not have to be a Black Label book, but because it is, they took advantage of it. The language is there. The first third of the book, Harley Quinn and her party are in their underwear, But the only thing I didn't care for too much in this was they made Cassandra Cain, who is the orphan, they made her more like her movie character than the comic character, where everybody else reverts more to the comic character. Other than that, yeah, this was a great book, you guys. Thank you for recommending it. I really enjoyed it. I already ordered the next 2 or 3 that are coming out as well. So
Awesome. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. All right. I have a question for Kirby. Are you not drunk enough?
No, not quite a bit. So I take a break this week. But at the comic book purge, I grabbed Not Drunk Enough by Tessa Stone, book 1. Logan and Abraham are just a couple repairmen responding to a call from a creepy corporate laboratory in the middle of the night. What could go wrong? How about freaky monsters attack, Abraham disappears, and Logan has to team up with 3 strangers who are also mysteriously trapped in the building to untangle a web of intrigue and betrayal, all while evading the horrific creatures stalking them from the shadows. Maybe things would be easier if Logan knew who he could trust. Then again, maybe not. The artwork in here is strange. It's the characters are very strange. I definitely wasn't drunk enough to read this. I think they should have went a different route and said that don't take too much LSD when you're reading this, because that would have went better with this. The storylines, it's quite the trip. You got 3 scientists that basically, one guy has a friend, a little tree that becomes his friend called Audrey, which he named after from Little Shop of Horrors. Well, he brought that plant back to life, and it was a man-eating, well, not man-eating quite yet. It was a fly-eating plant still at that time. But somehow, one of the other scientists wanted to learn more about things, and you find out later on in the storyline that scientist's son died 6 years ago, and at that time, he wanted to revive his son. So he did some things, played with some stuff, came up with some different chemical reactions that ended up reviving his son in some way, but also the character that has the Audrey plant ended up combining himself with that, so he's got a second mouth on his forehead with this plant tongue that likes to keep coming out and stuff, and then the tongue will come out his other mouth every now and then. It's very strange story. I don't know what the hell I read, but no one really finalizes anything in here. I know it says book 1, but they could have got some finalization to some of the things, or some characters could have died or been taken out, but instead they focus on the creatures, but the creatures are all part of the other characters. But I would read 1 or 2 more of these to find out more, go beyond, but yeah, it was very confusing during the reading. Yes, I was drinking while I read it.
But you weren't tripping enough.
No, I wasn't tripping enough. I think I would have understood it more if I would have done that. But yeah, it was interesting. So,
Okay.
you got to do mezcal, not tequila.
yeah.
And if you want to take us home with the stack,
All right, you think I got enough time to pump that in before others? I can do it pretty quick. All right, Green Lantern Lost Army. If you like Green Lantern, this is another great one where a lot of the different characters get popped in here. You got Arisia Arab, John Stewart, Drill Breck, Kilowog's in here again, 2-6, Krona, and Guy Gardner pops in later on. He, for some reason, has a green and a red ring when he pops in. They have these little I don't know what you want to call them, but little disease floating things that are surrounding them in the universe they're in, and they're just getting attacked by them. Their powers are running low. They have no recharge station. They're trying to figure out what these things are. They find some other Green Lanterns that are frozen in these red crystals, dead. That apparently happens to you when these things touch you and take over your body. But the story goes on to, it doesn't finish itself. It's issue 1, of course. So if you're into it, you'll enjoy it. At the end, you'll see they come across a big menace, and then you'll find out a little more of the story and go from there. But that was fun. Vampirella. This was Vengeance of Vampirella. I can't remember. Volume 2, number 6. She's just in this area surrounded by this plant type things just taking over the whole area. There's giant spiders, different type of weed creatures and stuff. She has to fight through. She actually gets cut up and damaged enough where she almost dies. And it's, again, ongoing. So I didn't read anything before or after. I love the cover. So I bought one through Midtown, and then I went to the Comic Purge and seen the cover. It's like, hey, I love that cover. So I bought a second one. So another one of my multi-comics that I like to buy. So, then Blood Rain, Sky of Fire. Number 1, if you like the video game, this basically runs right off it. She has her arm blades. Another character gets it. You got lots of Nazis. Goes back to her childhood. Gives you some storyline from there. She fights them off. They end up getting into like a Hindenburg incident where the airship ends up, has to go up in an airship, and then of course there's vampires in there. They fight, and the ship ends up bursting into flames and stuff like that. You got werewolf creatures in here and stuff. So if you're into any of that stuff, this is a fun story. It's a nice thick one, so it's well worth it. But Blood Rain, check it out. And I grabbed Mighty Mouse because I haven't read Mighty Mouse in forever, and I'm like, hey, this is fun. Well, this isn't Mighty Mouse. I mean, it is and it isn't. It starts out with a little Mighty Mouse story saying this is what you want, but you're not going to get this. And then it goes into where it's basically a young kid being bullied and abused, and he's an artist, and he loves Mighty Mouse, goes home, watches the cartoons after school because mom's off working 2 jobs, single mom and stuff like that. And so he's sitting there just watching the cartoon, and then all of a sudden Mighty Mouse just comes popping out of the screen. I can't find that exact one. But Mighty Mouse gets dragged out of the TV screen as he's sitting there saying he wishes he had someone like him to help him out. And then all of a sudden, Mighty Mouse helps him out. Throughout the rest of the story, they get to know each other and what's going on, but you don't get to see them go on beyond that. So that's going to be, I'm guessing, the next one. This is Mighty Mouse number 1, 399 cents. But yeah, so hopefully we'll get more story from that in the next couple issues. I love zombies, of course, and I can't pass up much Night of the Living Dead stuff. This was a Night of the Living Dead Christmas story. This was fun. It was a holiday special. Basically, a group of people are in this cabin in the woods, and one's dressed up like Santa Claus. They're having their little Christmas party together, a few couples. A couple of them go off to an old barn in the back, and they're making out and start to strip down, and all of a sudden, zombies start coming up out of the ground and grabbing them and stuff. Can't really show you too many pictures of this because you get a lot of nudity in this one because the zombies are already stripped down naked and they're just wandering around dead. And even for the girls, some boys, you even get to see a little dangling around in this one. But basic zombie story. They go through, deal with the threats. The zombies come in. few people get zombified. They come into the house. More people get zombified. Then you find out that one of the people in the house, she killed her ex-boyfriend, and the person he was cheating on her, that was the two original zombies in the barn. So it's a fun little story. And then sticking with the zombie storyline, you got Dead of Winter. This one, I want to give you the quick synopsis on this one, though. But good dog. The apocalypse has come and gone, and all it's left us are zombies. An endless winter and empty hearts. Diaz keeps bringing back survivors, thinking life is hope, but every new face is a hungry mouth, and our stores are growing empty. Another hungry mouth like the Legion outside, waiting for us, except not eating us. These survivors want like canned beans and French fries. You get the metaphor, though. Like they said, a group of people are stuck in there. They constantly go out further and further trying to find things. And you got this dog that just hates zombies. And it's just fun watching him because they send him out first and he just goes in and attacks the zombies. He'll go grab him by the throat, jump through a window and stuff. I don't know how he doesn't get infected or not. I'm hoping there's more to it. This is issue 1, so I'm hoping this is an ongoing series. But and then the last one, for fun in the end, did a Scooby-Doo team up, had Harley Quinn. She just wants the Scooby gang to be part of her gang. And so she recruits them and they work together for a while. Then the Joker comes in, he's the bad guy. So then Harley's all happy because he's back. And so she's running around with him. They have to go after the Joker. And they've beat the Joker in the past. And Batman makes an appearance in here and stuff. But yeah, it's just your basic fun Scooby-Doo comic book. But you get Harley Quinn, Batman, and the Joker in here. So there you go.
All right. Cool. All right. That'll do it for the weekly reviews. We have one more segment, the letters page. Jim's leaving.
Bye, Jim.
Yeah.
Going cross country, I think. Okay, audio stopped. And we'll go through this next segment here. We are recording.
Start the grill up.
Okay, here we go. Welcome to the letters page, everybody. This week's question we are going to discuss. The question is, oh no, the house next door is for sale. Who would you hate to have as your neighbor? And who would you love to have as your neighbor? Who would I hate to have as my neighbor? Similar to Dr. Kurt's that answer is going to be the X-Men, because that mansion gets blown up quite a bit. Looks like David's reaction may have been the same. But yeah, it seems
I didn't say anything while his for that reason. I'm like, yeah, I think a lot of people are going to have the same reason. Mine would have been the X-Men for that very reason. How many times has that damn place been blown up? Oh, go ahead, though. I'll figure something else out.
It's basically like Buffy Summers' house. They make how it just gets destroyed and trashed, almost every week. And yeah. So, but as a great counter to that, who would I love to live next to actually would be the X-Men, because I think they're a lot of fun. There's a lot of cool different characters, a lot of weirdos and stuff like that, cool abilities. I think there's a lot of people to befriend, and I think it would just be a great circle to throw myself into. And so, yep, my answer is actually the same for both of them. All right, Damon.
Who would I hate to have move in? It would be Darth Vader. I could just picture it, I find your lack of hedging disturbing, and then I just start choking to death right there while I'm trying to hedge my bush and stuff. So, yeah, I would say Darth Vader. And then for the person that I would love to move in, it would have to be Elvira from the 80s. I mean, I told my wife that.
I'm sorry, Elvira from the 80s or in her 80s?
No, Elvira from the mid 80s.
Oh,
yeah, I already told.
She's in her 80s now.
85.
Yeah, she still looks good.
You know what?
Today.
She does.
But My wife knows that if Elvira from the 80s would knock, that'd be the one woman that might get me to Stray from the Nest. She was my teenage heartthrob back in the day. So she's a comic person, so it still qualifies. So if she moved in next door, that would be a lot of fun, especially in the summertime if she's bathing out by the pool, working on her tan. It could be fun. You know, and if she's her movie, she's always on the lookout for like
Elvira with a tan?
A tan or two is white.
Yeah, but just the love of horror movies would be something to talk about.
When I posed that question, I had a feeling that this would be the kind of answer I'd get. So it's working out perfectly.
Well, it was either her or Howard the Duck, but so I went with her though.
And Howard the Duck for all the same reasons.
You never run short of eggs for an omelet.
Ooh.
Alrighty, David, do you have an answer?
Well, I did. But who wouldn't I want to live? Probably Anthony, because he'd steal all my stuff. You know, I could fill in that blank with so many different characters, though, for the same reasons. I mean, how many times has Spider-Man's apartment been destroyed, or, you know, just all these different characters in comics? Even maintaining their secret identity, somehow they manage to get their apartment or house or neighborhood or whatever just destroyed. So, you know, honestly, I don't know if there's anybody from the comic book world, at least not the stuff that I read, that I would want to be my neighbor for that reason. And there's a lot of villains that I wouldn't want in there for other reasons. I mean, just that, you know, you don't want Kingpin living next to you. Just all the stuff that would, you know, come by, and then you'd always have to worry about stuff. You know, he might not be Darth Vader, but you'd still have to be a little concerned that, well, what if he doesn't like what you're doing with your yard and whatever? It's just, yeah, who wants neighbors like that?
Although if Kingpin is your neighbor, you yourself might be living in a pretty nice place, because he wouldn't really slum it. So that might be the one positive.
That's true. And you
there's
can
a
say
lot of
that about the X-Men normally living in a mansion, but they've done some slumming too. I mean, they were living in the back room of a bar for a while there.
Yeah.
So they lived in a ghost town in Australia. Yeah, they've lived in some questionable places.
But then they could just take the entire mansion and just drop it in the middle of Central Park. So.
Yeah, you know, you could say the same thing. You know, Batman. You know, if you're Batman's neighbor, you probably got a pretty nice place. And, you know, thinking about it, you know, because I think somebody mentioned something about Batman for the same thing. You wouldn't want, you know, his villains coming along. But he doesn't really have anybody close by. So if you're his neighbor, you probably got a nice place, but you've also got quite a bit of space between. And now that I think of it, you kind of would have the same thing with the X-Men if you're talking about the mansion, because that Chuck, you know, he's got a lot of land.
Oh, Chuck.
I mean, his yard is huge. So, you know, maybe being his neighbor puts you far enough away from everything that you're okay.
Good old Chuck Xavier. Good grief. All right. Did you answer everything of the question?
As much as I'm going to.
Yep. Okay. Kirby.
Well, my first one for not wanting to have next to me would, because I don't really want someone that's on the pedophile list that living next to me. So I really wouldn't want to have Thanos next to me. So since he's just running around, going to planet, killing all the planets off and just stealing the children and keeping them. So, and then Shelley brought up a good one there too. Another thought would be, can't think of his name, but it's a character played by Anthony Lash. I can't remember the character's name, but that would probably drive me nuts if that character was living next to me. And then the one I would like to have living next to me, my pick was Elvira also, because I'd like to see her getting a suntan to the full moon at night. But another character I could live with would be Harley Quinn, because she'd keep it exciting at all times. something always happening next door.
You know, it's funny. Jim came back real suddenly when you said Harley.
The only tease I'll give you about that possible character, maybe you're not too far off. That's all I'll say. All right, let's jump over to Katie.
Okay, so the character not living next to me is the Joker. The Dark Knight version of the Joker was like my first big exposure to that character, and it really freaked me out. I think the loss of control that I would suffer living next to someone like not even owning my own space or life, because this guy next to me is a literal psycho. He's always blowing stuff off, setting things on fire. And, he'd probably try to rope me into a scheme to kill the Batman, and I'd say, no, Joker, I don't want to kill the Batman. And who did that? And the person I would listen to is from Mr. Rogers' name. The TV version of Night.
Cutting out again a little bit.
Yeah, you know what? She's got no audio icon at all. I just realized. So normally you
say
have
Black
to
Widow?
on a microphone, or you have to
I need to channel the energy. No, I need to channel the energy of Mr. Rogers right now, because I'm really tired of Zoom doing this. But yeah, Mr. Rogers was he's America's person. And I mean, who are the people in your neighborhood? Mr. Rogers, of course. Anyway.
All right. Jim.
Who would I not want to live next to me? Bruce Banner. I mean, you always have to walk on eggshells. You parked your car in front of his house. Now it's a satellite. You cut your hedges too short. Whoops, there they go. Party's too loud. Hulk smash. Now, I didn't think of this ahead of time, but who I would like to, sticking with that, his cousin would be a pretty good neighbor. Jennifer, She-Hulk. Look good in a bikini, whether she's green or not.
But he's probably still going to come by for like family reunions. So.
Yeah.
Thanksgiving. No.
You can tolerate that once or twice a year.
Here you go. And I was wondering if before we leave here, if you heard from Will at all, because you're in the Upside Down right now. Have you seen Will around?
Nope.
Okay, just wanted to check. So that's why you subscribe to the YouTube videos. Merry Christmas to our YouTube video watchers. Okay, so that will do it for this issue of the Crimson Cowl Comic Club podcast. We will meet here again next week for another club pick as well as weekly reviews. This entire time, I've been waiting for my Uber at the Fire Festival.
I've been sitting here thinking of Elvira.
I've been sitting here thinking of who I am.
I'm just not drunk enough.
I am #1 on Black Widow's hit list.
And Jim.
And Jim is Mr. Freeze.
All right. I don't know what's going on, so to be continued.
They're a little creepy.